Hello, everybody, and welcome to this health update, sort of cancer journey update video. This is something I've been planning to do for a few days since I got back home from the hospital, and I felt now is a good time to do it. So, if you're someone who is just finding my channel now, whether it's through some of the shorts I've been doing or you're coming across the channel from reaction, just know that this is going to be a totally different thing here on my channel. I do not do this very often. My channel normally here we react to albums, usually full albums, sometimes individual songs, but I usually react to music. And I spent almost all of last year, 2023, reacting to the entire Metallica catalog because I had never heard it before with some of my friends. I also did some Depeche Mode, Blur, all sorts of different things, new albums that come out. I try to keep track of things that I care about and do reactions for them here, whether they're with a couple of my buddies or just by myself. So, like I said, if this is your first time finding the channel, that's normally what I have here. And you can go look through all my playlists. You can go look through all of the different videos, see if you find an artist you like, and see if you vibe with this our sort of reaction style here. We like to talk for a long time, especially about Metallica. If you're one of the people who has been following the channel because of Metallica or any of those reactions, I want to start off this video by saying thank you very much. I've been getting a lot of support from people in the comments, and I know it sounds sappy and silly, but it actually does mean a lot to me. I cannot believe how many people have such kind, nice words to say. And since I started uploading my cancer album recommendation shorts videos while I was in the hospital, I am floored by the number of people who are saying they're from different countries, countries from around the world. And I absolutely love that. So if you're someone who has found my channel through that, know that I greatly appreciate all the words of encouragement. And I also really appreciate everybody telling me where they're coming from. And one thing that's really important to me, for those of you who don't know, is I love listening to foreign language music. I love listening to music that is not in English. The only language I speak is English. And a lot of my favorite artists don't speak a lick of English in their music at all. So if you're someone from a country whose primary language is not English, please feel free in comments on any of my videos to recommend a band that you think I might like from your country that speaks in your native language. I would absolutely love to check that out. Whatever it is, no matter what kind of style of music it is. On my channel here, we listen to all sorts of music. But yeah, so please feel free to let me do that. And know, everybody, I appreciate the kind words in the comments and just the positive vibes that I'm getting from everybody as I go through this journey here. One of the things that I wanted to say right away is that this video will also be sort of sitting here on my channel as a way to sort of explain to everybody how this whole journey sort of started. I don't plan on making update videos like this very often, maybe if milestones happen or something like that. But this video is also for family and friends, people I can post this to, like on Facebook or whatever. So if you're someone who knows me personally in my personal life, thank you for checking this video out. Feel free to look around the channel as well. You can listen to me talk for hours and hours on end about music that you probably don't care about. But thank you for at least checking this video out and for continuing to stay interested in what's going on with me. So I just want to kind of go through this video, everything that's happened so far, a little bit of a timeline, and then just kind of, I don't have anything planned ahead for this. I just was going to talk about what's been going on so far so that I can direct people in comments on future videos to this video so that they can kind of get a grasp of what's going on. So if you've been following me on the channel for the last year or so, you'll know that last June or July, I started to kind of feel sick. And during the videos, I would have handkerchiefs here to wipe sweat off my face, which isn't that uncommon. I mean, I have lights here and everything set up, but I would sweat a lot during videos. And not just because Metallica is super awesome or anything like that, just sweating a lot. and I also had kind of a cough. And so for several months, I would keep cough drops around the house and handkerchiefs handy, and just kind of trying to like live with those sort of two symptoms. And I think what ended up happening was I ended up getting COVID. And I had had COVID when it initially started back, in 2020, whatever. I don't even remember. It's been such a crazy few years. But my family had gotten COVID originally. It wasn't that bad because we had gotten vaccinated. But I hadn't gotten any of the vaccination shots since then. I guess I didn't think that I needed them, or I wasn't keeping up, or I thought the fact that I had COVID already meant that I wouldn't get it again. But I believe I got it sometime in June and probably didn't know. I was very sick for about a week or so with different symptoms. And then it was after that that I started to get sweaty and my little cough. And it was one of the worst things was I was having trouble sleeping at night because I would wake up in a sweat. And so I was having sort of night sweats and everything, not as bad as they would get later on in the year, but little bits here and there. And so that went on for a couple of months. And then I think it was sometime in October, I got another cold. And what the doctors that I've talked to since all of this has happened think is that possibly I may have gotten a different strand of COVID, or basically gotten COVID again within just a few months of having it, which is, I think, a little bit more rare. But that may be what ended up happening, or I just got some sort of a severe cold. But I was knocked out for like another week in October, sort of September. And this whole time I hadn't been going to the doctor. My family is the type of family where we don't really go to hospitals for things very often. My legs got to basically be hanging off my body before I decide to go make a doctor's appointment and head in. And so we had been avoiding going to the doctor because we were assuming what they were going to say was that I was just suffering from some strange symptoms of long COVID. And so when I got sick for another week or so in September, October, it was sort of the same thing. I was just down for a while, kind of had like flu, but also bad cold. And that was the night sweats got a little bit worse and just sort of wasn't feeling that great. And again, we just kind of chalked it up to maybe getting sick. At that point, we do know for a fact that my mother had COVID, and I probably got COVID at that point as well, though I was never tested. I did, after my mother tested positive for COVID, I did test, and I tested negative, but that was already about a week or so after I had been very sick for a week. So, I'm not too sure about how the timing on all of that and how that works, but that seems to be kind of what was going on there. And so over the next couple of months, my health just sort of started to deteriorate a little bit, I guess. Like I said, the night I was having so much trouble sleeping at night. I'd have a cough all the time. I mentioned cough drops. I would have cough drops open and then sitting on the like little cough drop wrapper all around the house. And if I started to cough, I'd just run and grab one, put it in my mouth, suck on it for a little bit, and then put it back on the wrapper. And that would help my cough. And I would sweat during the day as well. And you can see it in almost every video that we recorded from August to December to now, basically. At the beginning of every video I have here on my channel, I explain to everybody that I have to have a handkerchief and that I have to have cough drops and stuff around, drink water, drink stuff during the videos constantly to prevent myself from coughing or, having, trying to sweat and stuff. Some of the videos I had to wear my handkerchief as a bandana because I was sweating so much. And so over those few months, I just didn't really notice it, but I started to lose weight, and I don't weigh myself very often ever, but we do know that I weighed 275 pounds or so. We think around the beginning of November, and by the time I went into the hospital to start getting tested in December, I was already down to 240. So I had lost about 30 pounds. And at this point right now, I think I've lost about 40 pounds. So that would be 40 pounds or so over the last month and a half or so. For people who are familiar with the channel, you may know, like, or notice, like, this is a shirt that used to be tight on me. And it is no longer tight. It is a big shirt. None of my pants really fit me anymore. They fall down, and I don't have belts that are small enough anymore. So I myself personally started noticing it with my arms. When I was in the shower, I was looking at my arms, and I just was thinking, man, my arms look really small. And then over time, I noticed sort of my face and my jawline, and particularly my collarbone here, just showing up more prominently. And I could see basically that I was getting smaller. And so that was one of the things that sort of alerted us that something was wrong. Another thing that really alerted us that something was wrong was towards the end of November and into the beginning of December, I started to get nosebleeds, and they would and I've had nosebleeds kind of throughout my life here and there. I have hay fever, and I've had, I've been dealt with nosebleeds, not very often, but when I was littler, I would have nosebleeds more often. And I had a nosebleed, and I would notice that it lasted longer than I thought it should. I'd get kind of frustrated because I'd sit there and I'd hold my nose, and in the normally 10 minutes maybe or so, you could take your finger off and it'd be fine. But I would have to sit there for longer, maybe like a half hour or so. And at the same time, I noticed that if I, just like got a little cut or something on my arm, or if I, scratched, something that would normally maybe just make a little red mark, there would be a little trail of blood down my arm or whatever. And so I guess I kind of just sort of subconsciously noticed that I was bleeding a little bit more. And so because of these nosebleeds that I would get, and they were lasting a little bit longer, and all these other things that I've mentioned, this entire time I've, like I said, been dealing with issues sleeping and all sorts of other things like that. So I don't want to repeat myself too much, but like I said, I don't have this video planned out very well. But the night sweats were really getting really bad. It was to the point where I would fall asleep, and I could only sleep for like maybe 15 minutes or so. And I would just wake up drenched in sweat, and it was very annoying. And I was constantly hot at night. I would have 2 fans on me and a humidifier in my room, and because my mouth would get super dry at night, which our house is pretty dry, and obviously it's the cold winter air, and in December it was getting really cold. And so I had a humidifier in my room, and I would get nosebleeds at night and have to just like sit up in bed at night, hoping that that it would stop eventually. And then I'd have to be very careful, because if I laid back down, I didn't want to have my nose bleeding, into the back of my throat. But even though I do think that probably happened quite a bit. But anyway, sometime in December, middle of December, it must have been, I had a nosebleed that lasted for a long time. It was like 4.5 hours, basically. And it was at that point that I was like, we have to do something. We have to go to the doctor and see what's going on. And to be honest, we thought that maybe it was high blood pressure or something simple like that. And that we would just be, we would find out what it was, probably take some tests, find out what it was, and hopefully be able to maybe go on some sort of a regimen or something like that. Turns out it wasn't high blood pressure, obviously. But we went to, I don't really have a primary physician, which is kind of weird to say, but I guess that tells you how often I go to the doctor. My entire adult life, I've only been to the doctor or to the hospital for appointments maybe like 5 or 6 times ever. And I've had very bad luck with those appointments. On occasion, I've gone to the hospital to see a doctor because my jaw was bothering me. And I would sit there and talk to the doctor about everything other than my jaw, and the doctor never touched my face or looked in my mouth or anything. And I know jaw is a different thing, and dentists and all that and whatnot, but like my opinion of hospitals wasn't very good, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. And so we went to I was like, well, I don't have a primary physician, so we'll pick a doctor and just go to the nearest sort of clinic hospital that's near us, and we'll explain the situation. And I'm assuming they'll take some tests. And like I said, we were thinking it was going to probably be like high blood pressure or something like that. Even though I know all these symptoms are probably too crazy to be accountable for just like high blood pressure or something simple, maybe diabetes or something like that. I don't know. I didn't know anything at that point. So this was mid-December. So I went in and they did some blood tests, and the blood tests came back that I was really low on my platelets, which is the third function, I guess, of the blood or something. Again, I'm not a medical expert, but your blood or your bone marrow, your blood creates, there's three functions, I guess, of the blood, right? There's red blood cells, white blood cells, and there's platelets. And your platelets are supposed to be above 100, and my platelets were at 12. They were like extremely low. And so my doctor who I'd seen ordered these tests, saw the results, and then referred me to a hematologist, a blood doctor in Lincoln, Nebraska, who I went to go see, and very awesome doctor. And she started to run some more complicated tests on me, which included a few different things. But one of the things that she ran was a bone marrow biopsy, where they stick a needle sort of into your hip bone to get into the bone marrow to get a sample of bone marrow. And so we did that. And it must have been beginning of January at this point. And we got a call a few days later. It would have been January 9th. And the doctor said, we figured out what's going on. We had been told before that it was probably cancer and that it was probably some sort of lymphoma. And on the 9th of January, we were called by my doctor, the hematologist in Lincoln, and she said that doing the bone marrow biopsy told us what we needed to know. You have leukemia. And I am going to refer you to a doctor at the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha. And she gave me his name, and she said, I'm making an appointment for you to see him tomorrow. So that would have been the 10th of January. And so we were like, wow, okay, all right. So I found out I had leukemia on the 9th, and then we had an appointment scheduled for the next day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so the next day I got up and I took a shower, I got up and I was getting ready to go, and I took a shower. And while I was in the shower, the doctor, who we hadn't met yet, but my new doctor, called and said, we think you need to come in right away, and you need to bring clothes to stay for 5 to 7 days. And just plan on staying. And so I got out of the shower. I didn't answer the phone. My mother answered the phone. And they told me that, and I said, oh, wow, okay, well, I guess this is it. Here we go. And so we loaded up the vehicle and drove to Omaha, which from where I live is about an hour, maybe hour and 10 minutes, hour and a half or so to get all the way through Omaha, which Omaha, for those of you who don't know, is in Nebraska and has a population of around 1 million people. So it's a big city. And I come from a small town of 302 people, 346 people as I was growing up. It's dwindled since then. And so we went to the hospital and we met with the doctor. And he said, we are admitting you to the hospital. You're going to be here for a while, maybe a week. And we are going to basically start giving you treatment for this cancer. The doctor did a fantastic job explaining what I had, and he seems like a great guy. I'm going to go see him tomorrow, but he did a great job explaining, and it's all very overwhelming. And you can imagine me and my two parents sitting in the hospital room, getting all this information for the first time. And he said, "We're admitting you. You're going to be going up to the 7th floor, and you will be there for a week or so, and we're going to start treatments. We're going to start getting everything sorted out, and we're going to get you on a road to recovery." And he said, because of the type of leukemia that I have and my age and my general health, which he said was pretty good, which is kind of funny because I have never been the type of person to pay attention to my health ever. I am not a health person at all. I barely ever exercise. And I'm not a very physically active person. But I also, am not like crazy out of shape or anything like that. I just have never really paid attention to my physical well-being. I've basically been, like I said, I weighed about 275, 280 for the last like 20 years, basically. I was a very big, large kid in high school, not necessarily a huge fat kid, though I was definitely fat, but I was tall. I was like 6'1" when I was in like sixth, seventh grade. And I basically have stayed the same size as I've been an adult. And so, I'm not a very, like I said, I'm not a physically active, physically conscious, like physically wellness type of person. But he said, because you're relative, like you're in good health and your age, what we're going to do is treat your leukemia with the same treatment plans we use for children, which is a very aggressive treatment plan where they give me lots of chemotherapy drugs up front, hoping to sort of like, I guess, smash the cancer drugs out of my system. So the way it was sort of explained to me, in case you're curious, is that my bone marrow is creating like basically 20% more. I don't know if I'm getting the math right, but basically it was explained to me that my bone marrow is creating 20% more cells than it should, for whatever reason. We don't have no clue why this happened, by the way. And the doctor said it's possible that it could have been some sort of a viral thing, which COVID is a virus, but he didn't necessarily think that it was COVID, or the fact that I maybe gotten COVID twice so close in a row or anything like that. He just said didn't know. And honestly, the way he put it was, at this point you have it. We don't need to focus on why you have it. We need to just focus on getting rid of it. So anyway, apparently what's happening is my bone marrow is creating more cells than it should, and those extra cells are the cancer, and they are causing all sorts of havoc in my body. One other thing I should mention too, the doctor that I'd seen in Lincoln, Nebraska, found that my spleen was very swollen. And I totally forgot about that. Almost all of November and December, my appetite went way down. Like I would normally, for example, if I sat down to eat a meal and we were eating hamburgers, well, maybe not hamburgers, hot dogs, we'll say, I would eat 2 hot dogs, some French fries, and maybe some macaroni salad. Well, throughout November and December, my appetite went way down, and I would only be able to eat like a hot dog and a couple fries and a little bit of macaroni salad, and I would just feel completely full. And so that was when I noticed, that was when the weight started to go down. But one of the reasons for that is because my spleen was enlarged to 3 to 4 times the size, the average of what it was supposed to be. And I didn't realize that. You can't tell, but it was weird. I guess I could kind of feel my stomach a little bit being a little different than it should. But so my spleen was big. That was one of the other reasons they started doing all the testing that they were and everything. But because of my spleen being so big, what they thought was happening was my body was producing platelets, and the platelets were getting caught in the spleen. And that's why my blood was flowing more from my nose, and I would have trouble, platelets control clotting in your body. So if you have a cut or something on your arm, if you cover it, put pressure on it, the wound will clot over and stop bleeding. But because my platelets were so low, because they were all getting caught in my spleen, and basically just my spleen was using them or dissipating them or something, my wound would not stop bleeding. And so the same thing would happen with my bloody noses. So I know I'm kind of talking out of order and it's all chaos right now, but that's what it's like in my head, I guess, as I'm trying to organize my thoughts. So bear with me. But anyway, my cancer cells, my bone marrow is creating more cells than it's supposed to. And those extra cells, from what I understand, are the cancer. And so all this treatment that we're doing is to try to relegate my bone marrow to just creating what it's supposed to and not creating any extra cancer cells, I guess. And so anyway, I got admitted into the hospital then on the 10th of January, and my mother was great the entire time. She stayed with me the entire time I was in the hospital, and my dad drove us to Omaha. And then we live on a farm, and so we have obviously responsibilities to. We have a very small herd of cattle, and there's responsibilities on the farm. So he did not stay the first night he went home. But the thing is that on the 10th of January, 2024, as he was driving home, the snow started to fall. And he called us and said, I can barely see anything. It is a complete whiteout. Traffic is going 20 miles an hour. And what should have taken him an hour drive home ended up taking him 2.5 hours to drive home. And it was a miserable ride for him. And the next day, the entire world was completely different because we had had an enormous snowstorm that basically continued for 2 days after that. So there's a lot of really surreal things that were going on this whole time. Immediately I got put in my room, and it was a nice room, and there was a sort of like a side couch that could fold out into a bed for my mom. And so that's where she slept the first 2 nights. And then every night after that, she slept in a recliner that we moved to the other side of the room because one whole wall of my room was these big windows that was really nice. I had a nice view. I could see out onto all these houses, this nice residential area, and the rest of the hospital, and this really cool sort of like smokestack thing that was very like a not Chitty Chitty Bang, Mary Poppins-ish smokestack that would put out these awesome smoke like cloud formations. So we got to look out the window and see that. But because there were so many windows against the wall, and because the temperature dropped to like 20 below for days on end with this storm, this winter storm, it was too cold for my mom to sleep against the wall where the couch was. So we moved her over in a recliner, and she laid there. And thank goodness my mother is the type of person that can basically just sleep wherever, whatever. She can fall asleep in middle conversation. So she didn't have any trouble sleeping. I had trouble sleeping the first night because I had really bad restless leg syndrome. I was so hot. I had them bring in a fan and put it directly on me. And we moved the temperature in the room from like 75, which is what it was, to 66, I think was what we put it at. And for my entire duration of my stay at the hospital, the nurses would all come in and be like, ooh, it's nice and chilly in here, because a lot of the people on the 7th floor, which was the floor I was on, the cancer floor, I guess, one of the cancer floors, everyone had their rooms kept really warm, but mine was nice and chilly. And so the nurses liked to come in and chill for a second because it was the 10, 15 degrees cooler. But that first night was rough. I couldn't sleep at all. And I had an IV in my left arm, and I had a pick put in, which is what I have now still currently. And this is really great to have, so I can just go get blood drawn and infusions, and I can get medicine basically put in through these 2 lines that are connected up into basically my heart, I believe, into some vessels and whatnot, right up through my shoulder and into my chest, basically, for direct access. So it's really nice having this. But that first night I had, stuff coming from my left arm, my left wrist. I had, tubes. And I had this put in with stuff over here, and it was hard to sleep. I had to sleep on my back. Normally I sleep on my side. So it wasn't very good. I was sweating. It was miserable. And so then it was basically that was followed by days of interesting encounters. Doctors would come in, different doctors. I was given all sorts of medicines. Basically right away, because my platelet count was so low, basically right away I was given steroids. I've been taking large doses of steroids to help my body regulate itself enough so that my platelet count can go up so that they can give me a certain type of chemotherapy that requires a spinal tap. But they didn't want to do they can't do the spinal tap unless my platelets are above 50 because it's too dangerous to do in case something very remote chance would go wrong. There could be internal bleeding and stuff because my platelets would be too low to handle it. So for the first few days I was there, I was given lots of platelets. And so first of all, I want to just say thank you to anybody who's ever donated platelets. It's a much more complex process that I don't think it's that complex, but it takes longer to donate platelets than it does to donate blood. So thank you to anyone who's donated blood, but especially thank you to anybody who's ever donated platelets, because the process takes like 2 to 3 hours, I think. And what they do is they basically take your blood like they would normally if you're donating blood, and then they separate the platelets from the white and red blood cells, and then they actually put the white and red blood cells back into you. It was interesting. I asked several people about that. A lot of people didn't really know how that worked, but we found a nurse that was explaining it to me. So that was kind of an interesting process. So thank you if you've ever donated platelets. And if you don't know what I'm talking about at all, and you are someone that does donate blood, and that sounds like something that you would be interested in, definitely bring it up next time and see if that's something that you would do. I received, I think, 6 or 7 bags of platelets while I was at the hospital. And the first few days, they were trying to give them to me to see if they would go up. And what ended up happening was it just didn't. It would go up for a little while, and then my body would eat all the platelets or whatever, and I would stay at a low number below 20. And so right away, I was given steroids, and the steroids were to help, which steroids in large doses is a form of chemotherapy, in case you weren't aware. And so I've been taking large doses of steroids in the morning. I don't know. When I say large, I guess I don't know, but I take however many in the morning and then at night again. And the steroids are what kind of kept me going for a while. And then eventually I had one of the sort of chemo drugs. And then I had a different chemo drug. And I think at this point I've had 3 different chemotherapy drugs. None of them had any sort of adverse effects on me. At least so far. Things can change as we go on further with the process. But, when I was in the hospital, I felt very safe the entire time. It was very strange because I felt physically fine. I didn't really feel sick. Once I started taking the steroids, after a couple of 2 days in the hospital, basically, I could sleep as long as the nurses would let me sleep at night. Because they have to come in and check all sorts of things even throughout the night. So I could sleep however long I wanted, basically however many chunks of hours I could get. I stopped being so hot. Didn't cough at all. I didn't have a single nosebleed. So immediately I started to feel better almost once I got into the hospital. And it was just this very surreal feeling of the storm being outside. And I cannot, if this video has any historical value, if I watch this 40 years from now or whatever, I cannot impart upon you, I can't say enough the strangeness that was the weather during my entire stay in the hospital. Because we were admitted on Wednesday, and it wasn't until the following Tuesday that my father was able to actually get out of our driveway, through the country roads, across the highways, and back to Omaha to visit us and bring us some supplies, some extra clothes. I was there almost an entire week with just my mother and no contact from anyone from the outside because the weather was so horrific. The hospital was so low-staffed the first weekend I was there that one night I actually didn't receive dinner until 10:30 in the evening. That was how long it took them, the few people who were there cooking the food and then delivering it, to actually get the food to the patients in the hospital. And that was a weird day because I had a test. So I had breakfast in the morning, and then I was put on hold, so no lunch, and then I didn't eat again until 10:30 in the evening. And ooh, it was the most awful food I've ever had. It was absolutely terrible. It was so cold. It was macaroni and cheese, which is one of my favorite foods, and it had zero flavor and it was terrible. But I don't want to bore you with all the hospital food stuff, though that was something we thought about quite a bit. But the storm was just weird. We would watch the news, we would see reports, we were looking on our tablets and our phones on Facebook and just different news things. And we were seeing people we know here in our community, like with drifts that were higher than a car, or, what would happen was the snow was such a light snow that the snow would, the road would be graded or plowed so that it was clear for one car to go through. And then overnight, it would completely cover again in the areas where there were big snow drifts. People who are familiar with snowy areas throughout the world will understand how snow drifts and stuff work with the wind and everything. But, every day my dad had to get up and basically fight to get 3 miles to the farm where we keep our very small herd of cattle, like 20, 30 cattle. And he had trouble starting his vehicles because it was, 10 to 20 degrees below zero every day for 4 or 5 days in a row. And so it was very surreal, is like the only word I can say. And it was basically just my mom and I and the nurses at this hospital. And, we were visited by doctors every day, except for over the weekend. And actually maybe over the weekend too, but anyway, I'm just rambling at this point. But at some point, they realized that my platelets, they couldn't just force me platelets and that my platelets would go up. We needed to rely on the steroids for a while to do their job to help regulate my body. And so when I left the hospital, I believe my platelet count now is at like 28 or almost 30. So hopefully that continues to go up. And maybe now, if they give me some platelets, I'm scheduled to try to have the spinal tap on Friday of this week. And I'm recording this on Tuesday. But anyway, so the platelets started to improve. Basically, I was feeling better in almost every way, which was another surreal thing. I felt healthy. I was constantly hooked up to an IV with basically just giving me fluids because you use your kidneys to get rid of the kidneys are the organ in your body that gets rid of the cancer cells. So as the cancer cells get attacked or whatever by the steroids and all the different drugs, it goes into your kidneys, and basically you use the restroom to get rid of them. So they wanted me going to the restroom as much as possible. So I'd have to get up multiple times throughout the night and just throughout the day and keep track of how much I was going and all that stuff. Doesn't matter. But so everything was sort of working, and I started to feel better, which was very surreal because we were basically trapped in the hospital. There were very few people working. There was nobody there, and it was just surreal. I keep saying that word, and that's how this whole thing has felt. And I imagine cancer patients, people with cancer will say that word a lot. And this whole thing is surreal just in general thinking about it. But for me, it's the storm that really makes it interesting and different. And it was just a very unique experience, I believe, that I had. So anyway, over time, they there was one day where my protein was, or not my protein, my something was low, and so they had to give me something and monitor me for a while. And I got chemotherapy drugs every few days while I was in the hospital. We ended up being in there, I believe, for 11 days. We went in on a Wednesday and we left on. We went in there on a Wednesday and we left the following Saturday. So however many days that is, I'm not even sure. So, and it was late at night on Saturday as well. We were discharged. So however many days that is. Eventually the roads were cleared. Like I said, on Tuesday of the following week, my dad came, brought us some extra clothes, brought us some different things that we needed. My aunt sent us, that was kind of funny. On Friday, my sister ordered us a package from Target in Omaha. So there's multiple Target stores in Omaha, and she ordered a package to be delivered to the hospital from Target using I I can't remember what the service was, but basically a package from Target to the hospital. And it was supposed to give us some fun over the weekend. Well, there weren't going to be any people in the hospital, and we weren't going to have as much to do. And I got notifications on my phone that the package was going to be late. And so it was supposed to arrive at between 4 to 5 on Friday. Well, it got pushed back to Saturday, 10 to 11. Then it got pushed back to 4 to 5. Then it got pushed back to 8 to 9. Then it got pushed back to Sunday, 10 to 11. Then it got pushed back. We actually did not get the package until Monday in the afternoon. So it was pushed back that far, which was kind of funny. My aunt also ordered us a package from Target, probably the same Target. So we did get a delivery over the week of, food and a blanket and some extra pillows and things, which is what my dad brought. But my aunt did get me a blanket, so I do have a nice blanket and a Valentine's Day pillow that was actually very useful, small half-size pillow. But anyway, given drugs, we watched a lot of Food Network, which is really different for my family. We never watched Food Network, but it was really the only thing that was on that wasn't super depressing. And we were hungry constantly. That's another thing that's really good. My appetite came back full swing. I'm basically hungry constantly now, especially with all these steroids and the different drugs and everything. And I am very lucky. So far, I have not had any nausea issues or stomach pains at all. And so I've been enjoying eating. So fast forward to the last few days that I was in the hospital, and my blood sugar started going crazy, which is something that the doctors and everyone had anticipated. And so the day before we were released, I had to take basically 2.5 hours of diabetes training, basically, to learn how to control my blood sugar. And that was probably one of the worst situations in the hospital. Was for the last 2 days I was there, every single hour, they had to come and prick my fingers to check my blood sugar. And I counted the pricks on my fingers before we left, and it was over 40 for sure. And they had to do it multiple times, sometimes in a specific hour, because you do stuff before you eat, after you eat, whatever. And it was very miserable. My fingers were hurting a lot. And that's a sensation. Needles and stuff don't bother me that much. Blood doesn't bother me that much. But this was something that I wasn't used to. And for those of you who are diabetic, I'm sure you're very used to it. And, it's just a way of life for a lot of people. And I really, really, really empathize and sympathize with those people because I've had to do it so much. But we had to take classes to learn how to, deal with insulin and high blood sugar, low blood sugar, all that stuff, hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia. And upon being dismissed, eventually, then on Saturday, I have all this blood sugar stuff, and I have to give myself shots three times a day. Well, 4 times a day if you include the long one at night. I have to take my blood sugar before every meal, and at night as well. I got to go do that in a little bit. And so, man, I was not planning to talk for 45 minutes, but whatever. This is just a time capsule. If nobody ever watches this video, that's fine. But I had to deal with all that stuff, and that's been sort of one of the more difficult things because it's an entire lifestyle change. We've been counting carbs now, trying to figure out the math of everything a little bit, and that's not something my family's ever done. Like I said, we're not like a health. I'm not saying we're like fat slobs or anything, but we not necessarily a health-oriented way of thinking. If we went to a fast food restaurant, I would get 2 sandwiches or whatever, go home, eat them with some macaroni salad and some chips, and I never thought of it. I didn't realize that if I go to Arby's and get their awesome, cheddar fish sandwich that they've got right now, 2 for $7, in the past, I would have probably just gotten 2, gone home, eaten one with some macaroni salad and chips, and then for the meal later in the day, eaten another one with some macaroni salad or some cottage cheese or something and some chips. And now I realize that eating one of those sandwiches is the equivalent of eating an entire giant meal with like a steak and broccoli and, all sorts of different things. It has even less nutritional value than a giant meal of some other kind of thing. So anyway, that's been sort of something to deal with over the last few days. But blood sugar is what I've been doing the last few days. But we were dismissed from the hospital then on, I should look up the date. We were dismissed from the hospital on, I guess it would be the 20th. So we were there from the 9th through the 20th, and we were dismissed on the 20th and came home. And then I had a somewhat normal day on Sunday, and then so I don't want to talk about this forever, but there's lots of things to worry about with all of this, and I'm the type of person who worries. And I'm not sitting here worrying about my health or dying or what's going to happen to all my stuff if I die or anything, even though I have thought about all that. But for me, it was like financial stuff, because this is going to probably put my family in debt for millennia, for generations, even with the insurance that I have, which is not very good insurance, though they've been doing good so far as we know. But the other thing I worry about is the fact that we live in such a remote location. And I knew we were going to be traveling a lot. And this is going to probably sound very strange to some people, and I 100% understand that this is not a mindset that everybody has. But I have grown up in such a way that you do not just pick up and go somewhere. You plan your trip, right? If you're going to go to the city, you plan your trip. You go maybe once every 2 weeks or so to get groceries to the sort of closer city. But, if we're going to go to Omaha or Lincoln, the big cities that are in Nebraska, that's only a few times a year because it's far enough away. There's a lot of people. We generally don't deal with people very much. Traffic is very intimidating to my family because we just don't drive in traffic very often. We live in a rural area, and for 99% of the time we stay in a rural area. And then the city we usually go to for groceries and things like that has a Walmart and a Hy-Vee and a Goodwill and this entertaining stuff, the movie theater, is Fremont, Nebraska, which has a population of like 20,000 people, I think, maybe even less than that. So that's where we normally go. Going to a city with a population of 1 million people is culture shock, it's traffic shock, it's all sorts of things. Again, I understand that's not everybody's view on travel. I know a lot of people who travel an hour to work and an hour back every day, going into a city of 1 million people, driving on an interstate, traveling 95 mile an hour, this close to other vehicles, and it's just part of their daily routine. That is not how we as a family function, and especially me, having my slight driving anxiety. I lived in Omaha for 7 years, and not once did I ever drive on Dodge Street past 70th, like beyond 70th, and I never once in my life have ever driven on the interstate. I will not do it. I will drive hours out of my way to avoid driving on the interstate because I just get anxiety, and could I do it if I had to? Yes. Would I rather leave 3 hours early and take a different route? Every single time. So that maybe tells you a little bit of my mindset in terms of the traveling aspect, which is the thing I've been worrying about the most. So long story short there, we managed to set up accommodations basically with the University of Nebraska Medical Center, where I was staying for those however many days, that we would get my labs and certain things done. Basically, I would have to go back to the hospital and get checked up on and labs and stuff, blood work done on Mondays and Wednesdays. And then Fridays, I would be going back to Omaha to get chemotherapy. That was going to be my schedule for the next few weeks. Basically, with this form of chemotherapy, front loading everything, what they wanted to do initially was have about 30 to 35 days of like intense chemotherapy and steroids and all this stuff, and then sort of reassess everything, and then maybe another however many, like a month, 2 months, whatever, of slowly dwindling things down as hopefully the cancer would be slowly leaving my body. Because of my platelets and everything and the low counts for certain things, it hasn't gone as fast as they wanted to. But I think for the most part, things are still on track for us to be within the first like 30 to 35 days to sort of reassess where we're at. So we were in the hospital for 10, 11 days. So we've got like 20, 25 days or so to go before we reach that sort of point where they are going to do another bone marrow biopsy and test what my percentage of cancer cells is in my bone marrow at that point, along with the spinal tap that they want to do that they can't do unless my platelets are high enough. So what ended up happening to be the schedule that they were proposing and that they were hoping would happen was I would go to Fremont, the sort of 20,000-ish population city, on Mondays and Wednesdays to get blood work drawn, to let the hospital know how I'm doing. And then on Fridays, I would go back to Omaha, to the middle of Omaha, downtown, through all the traffic and craziness, to the same building that I was staying in, but on a lower floor, to get chemotherapy for basically that day. And so today is Tuesday of the first week of that schedule, and already everything's been thrown a kerfuffle. We had to go get our blood work drawn yesterday, which was Monday, which we did. And then we were told that I was low on something, so I had to get a special infusion of something today. So today we had to go back to Fremont to get the infusion. And while we were dealing with that, I was told that tomorrow, instead of going, which would be Wednesday, I would normally have a scheduled appointment in the morning in Fremont to get labs done again. We were going to be going back to Omaha because my doctor decided he wanted to try a different chemotherapy drug that is something that requires 8 hours to go through the process of. So tomorrow at 9 a.m., I have to be back at the hospital to start basically an 8-hour, is what I've been told, an 8-hour regimen of some chemotherapy drug or something that's going to take all day, basically. And I don't know, I'm assuming I'll just kind of be sitting there all day. But, my folks are going to be taking me, and then they're going to be sitting there the whole time. And I feel bad for them because they're not the type of people, like they don't have anything to go do in Omaha. As I've said, there's many things to go do in Omaha, but they're not going to leave. They'll probably my dad will probably sleep in the car and then maneuver the car around throughout the day so that it's in sun, if there is any sun, because it's supposed to be like freezing sleet rain. Terrible weather tomorrow as well. All the snow is still around, by the way, for future reference. And the roads are still terrible, but we managed to make it home and everything. So like we're only on day 3 of me being home for like my first normal week, and every day has been screwed up so far. So who knows what's going to be happening in the future. Gosh, this is an hour-long video. Well, I really did not want this to take that long, but it is what it is. I have to say, my parents have been amazing through this entire situation, and my mother especially for staying with me in the hospital the whole time. It was harder for us to find food for her, especially over the weekend, because we couldn't leave the hospital. There were no vehicles driving anywhere in the city. It was basically, Nebraska was in a state of emergency because of the storm. And there was a cafe in the hospital that operates throughout the week, but we didn't realize it was closed over the weekend. And so I was able to take my IV with me, the traveling cart thing with me, and walk around the hospital little bits every day. But one day they allowed us on Saturday, the first Saturday we were there, to unhook and travel through this giant mass of hospital buildings to a subway that's way like a mile on the other side of these massive buildings, so we could get some food so that my mom could have some food to eat over the weekend. And so she was an absolute trooper this entire time, and has been really as good and amazing as she possibly could be this whole time. And now she has to deal with cooking meals for me, because of me, that she would not normally make, and thinking about carbs and things in a way that we've never done before. So I want to just say I appreciate her so much, and that I would not have been able to do this without her so far. And then also to my dad for driving us around all over the place. I also have to say thank you, because my mom and I just couldn't do it. I don't think that I could drive to the hospital in Omaha. I could. It would take me a lot longer to get there because I'd have to go a different way. My dad is just like, nope, we're taking the Dodge, we're taking the road all the way there. So like, shout out to him, and also for having to deal with all the snow issues we've had, not being able to start the tractors or the vehicles that he needed to start to clear the roads, to get into the farm, to feed the cattle. You know, he's been having different things happen. He's fallen on the ice twice, hurt his knee over the last few days twice because it's so slippery and gross out there. And, you know, so he's been great this whole time. My whole family, my whole town, I'm Catholic, so we had a priest come visit us in the hospital. You know, we had lots of good things have happened throughout this entire situation, along with all the craziness. And so I want to say thank you to anybody. No one will probably ever see this from the hospital or anything like that, but thank you to anybody that made it easier on me throughout this entire process thus far. It is an ongoing process, and we'll see what ends up happening. So, yeah. So in true fashion for this channel, I wanted to make this video like 25 minutes long, and here we are at 56 minutes long. So if you're familiar with, no one's going to watch this all the way through. No way in heck. But that's all right. This can be a time capsule for me. Hopefully, in 10, 15, 20 years, I can show my niece, who's 2. She can see how I was feeling at this time. You know, my nephew, Hunter, who's 12, going to be turning 13 in a couple of months. I can show them this when they're older and they can see this. It can basically be, like I said, a little time capsule. But if anyone is insane enough to have watched all the way through this, thank you so much for watching. This is basically what our channel is. We talk for way too long about things that people don't care enough about to justify talking that long about those subjects. Except for One by Metallica, which is absolutely a terrible song, and I will never get tired of talking about how it is the most overrated song in Metallica's catalog by a extremely large margin. Trying to think if there's anything else. For 13 years, I've been editing a Harry Potter podcast called Alohomora. This is our shirt. And we have a book, which I don't have sitting up here. Oh, yeah, I do right here. We actually have 2 books. I don't have a copy of our second book yet. But this owl here is on my shirt. I've been editing Alohomora, the Harry Potter podcast, for 13 years now. And those people were really great this whole time. They were very patient with me. And in the 13 years I've been working for them, I have never missed a deadline on one of my episodes when it was my turn to edit. So I want to thank them. They also took up a collection for me with past people who've worked on the show and people who are working there presently. And so if any of those people ever see this video, which again, it's at the end of the video already, they probably won't see it. Thank you so much for what you have done for me, and I'll never be able to repay it. Probably not, but I will always work hard on the show, which I always would have anyway. And then also the last year, I've been working on a second Harry Potter podcast called 3 Broomsticks, and my having to be in the hospital for the week that it was possibly the worst week for that podcast since it started a year ago. And so I want to apologize to them for putting them in a bind and having to have one of them edit a long episode with more people than would normally be hosts on the episode. I know that the person who edited the episode ended up having to work very hard, and so I are much harder than they probably needed to. But I basically I'm saying I appreciate the people that I work with for being so generous as well, and for being patient. And I know, I have like the ultimate excuse now. Basically, I have leukemia, so it's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to tell me? You can't tell me to do nothing. I got leukemia, but I'm not that type of person. I want to make sure that I can get my work done, and doing something like editing a podcast for 6-7 hours, which is usually about what it takes if it's a long episode, which they're all long episodes, is a soothing thing for me. And so I don't want to discount that. And I want to, stay focused on those things and be able to continue to enjoy that kind of thing. So sorry, now I'm just getting tired and rambling. I'm going to end this video here. And like I said, no one will probably ever watch this, and that's fine. Time capsule, all that stuff. But this is basically everything that's happened to me up to this point. As of today, it is, at this point, 11/11 on January 23rd, Tuesday, January 23rd. And we will just see what happens moving forward. Got lots of fun things hopefully planned for the channel. But just stay tuned for some of those, and we'll see what ends up happening. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.